All right, so here we are today with Mike Visceglia, author of A View from the Side, a fantastic book that when I first saw it, thought it really was for and kind of dedicated towards the bass players. And when I started reading it, I realized it's a book that has a much wider appeal and great information, great stories, great advice. And so I thought we really wanted to make it available digitally for musicians. So let me introduce Mike. And Mike, thanks for joining us today.
I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for asking me.
Yeah, my pleasure. Let me ask you, the book, would you consider it a memoir, a business advice book, interviews with great, bass players? How did you approach it?
Well, it kind of has all of that stuff in there, although it's not overtly that. I approached it as kind of human interest stories that about and about musicians, but because some of the subject matter is really universal and touches on a lot of things that people go through, not necessarily the music business, but in their lives. And I didn't want to have a book that was geared just toward a musician or specifically a bass player, because I'm a bass player. I didn't want to have a book that was talking about the technicalities of music or the technology of bass playing, because that's too high and inside niche stuff. And I wanted to have it broadened out, that so there was more of a human interest, and even a layperson, anyone interested in travel stuff, anyone interested in music, even in general, would get something out of it. And that was my goal.
Well, I think you hit it on the head. With some of the great people that you got to interview and talk to for the book, can you give us, one of your favorite inside stories?
Well, I think my favorite story in the book is Leland Sklar's story about how he went from being James Taylor's bass player from the very, very beginning of James's career, to suddenly not being his bass player and not even getting a phone call from James about that after all these years. It's the kind of thing that I've encountered with. It's a strange thing with leaders and artists that a lot of times, you think that you're bonding over years and years with them on a different kind of level, and it's interesting that that's not necessarily the case, and that's not necessarily even a bad thing. It's just kind of the nature of the beast where that happens, and I think that's one of the interesting things about the relationships between musicians, and especially between band and leader. So I thought that was an interesting story, one of my favorite things.
Probably a lot of guys that, work with, stars, celebs. It's probably comforting to hear when things happen to them, and you relate a story like that make them feel that, they're sort of not alone. Because I have a lot of friends that have been on the road and gig, and it can be pretty devastating on many levels, besides the financial level of counting on a tour coming up or something like that, obviously. So, it's great inside emotional advice, that I think you get when you read the book.
Yeah, it's a testament to the flexibility, both physically and mentally and emotionally, that you must have if you're going to be a professional musician. You have to flex muscles that a lot of people never have to flex, the insecurities and financial and otherwise, but just the flexibility, because everything and anything can change at a moment's notice. And if you're not made of that kind of stuff, then it's not the kind of lifestyle for you. I can tell you that.
Yeah, and I've seen it tear, some good friends apart, and it took a while to get over, some of the loss of gigs. And, these are some dear friends, which I won't mention, but, that had a certain gig for a long time, very high profile, playing, big arenas and, very, very good money. And they had families, and all of a sudden they were expecting, like you said, like Lee Sklar said, expecting a call, and the call never came.
Yeah.
It's like kind of a fine, how do you do all of a sudden?
Yeah, it's that, and it's like the things that the burdens that you have to put on yourself and your family, your friends and family. Like I said, because things change constantly, and you never know. You could get a phone call, and tomorrow you have to start something in Japan, and your kid is sick or your wife is pregnant, whatever it is. You gotta jump, and it's not made for everyone. But because of that, you encounter such interesting people with so many interesting experiences, and that's one of the things I tried to portray in the book.
Yeah, well, there's some great stories. I mean, it's a very, very tough lifestyle, and most people, certainly from the outside, have no idea. They see the glamour. They get to a show and they see the lights and the screens, and 20,000 people screaming when you walk on stage. But then there's like the other 22 hours of the day that they don't see, right?
It's 2 hours of like glory and 22 hours of whatever.
So in terms of some of the advice type of things that come out in the book, what would, just to give people an idea, is there like kind of your favorite piece of advice that you gleaned out of, talking to all these guys?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, the most important thing, well, there's two basically equally important aspects to becoming a professional. One is that you have to constantly maintain your skill set. And when I called in the book, being a generalist, not a specialist.
Mm.
There's no room for, specialists are great, that you do one thing really, 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 really well, but it also narrows your, employment opportunities when you're a specialist rather than a generalist who can do a lot of things reasonably well. You don't have to be unbelievably fantastic at everything, but be able to do a lot of things really well. That's one thing. The other thing is being the kind of person that has a personality and a temperament that people want to be around, because you could be the greatest musician in the world. And like you said, it's only 2 hours on stage and 22 hours of, living with people that aren't your family. If you're not the kind of person that people want to be around, then they're not gonna hire you. And with all the travails and tribulations of being on the road, you have to really, maintain your composure and be the kind of person that uplifts the situation rather than brings it down.
Yeah, absolutely. So, these guys that you spoke to, the Tony Levins, Marcus Miller, Will Lee, did you have a kind of a planned set of questions for them? And, when you were interviewing them, was it hard to stay focused, or what were these guys like, when you were trying to put the book together?
Actually, what was great about it is they were all really forthcoming. They were all really interested, and they were very generous with their time. And I remember specifically the late, great Donald Duck Dunn, who's in the book. He didn't even have a email or anything. It's like, yeah, it had, a lot of it was done by phone, and his wife was writing things down because he was just talking to me, and it was really funny. Some of it was done with snail mail correspondence, believe it or not. I mean, that's how old school he was. But everybody was really generous, and I kind of, tailored questions toward different aspects of their particular career. But once again, I wanted to stay away from like anything technical about being a bass player. I wanted to just deal with lifestyle, interesting experiences, and human interest stories.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. What I obviously, Sting wrote the foreword. What was it like getting him on board, and kind of how did that happen?
Well, it actually happened through an intermediary. At the time, I had a very, very good friend that was his band leader and produced 3 albums of Sting's. And I was on the road with Suzanne Vega, who I've been on the road with on and off since 1985. And we found ourselves in I think it was in Vienna, and we were doing a gigantic outdoor concert in the middle of town. Obviously, it wasn't just our show, but Sting was on the show. So my friend was there. There was literally, I'm not making it up, there were 100,000 people there in the middle of the city, just around the square. And I told my friend, who's British, I told him about the book I was writing, and he's the one that came up with the idea. He said, "You want me to try to get something from Sting?" I said, "Nah." No, I said, "Of course." I said, "Yeah, absolutely. That would be amazing." So he's the one that kind of facilitated that. And that particular writing, the piece of written material that's there is, it's very unique, and it's a kind of a love story to the Fender bass, which I loved, and I thought that was a great introduction to where we were going with the book.
It's great. Well, I can't thank you enough for your time today, and really, it's a wonderful book that every musician and music fan, I think, would really enjoy, learn something from, and help pass the time, especially now when we're all hunkered inside like this.
It's a perfect time to read that. It's not War and Peace. It's a very, very digestible tome, as we'll put it.
Hopefully, it's peace and peace.
It's peace and peace. That's what we need.
Any last things that you want to mention that maybe we didn't touch on?
I just wanted to thank you guys for helping me bring this out there. Joe Bergamini was my champion with this, and thank you for putting it out both in print and then digitizing it to make it easily downloadable. And I think that's great. So I encourage everybody that's on either side of that, who wants a hard copy to look at, or just wants to read something on their smart device, to please get it.
Great. Well, thanks, Mike. Really appreciate it. Great job with the book, and be safe out there.
Yeah, everybody be safe and well. Thank you.
All right, we'll talk soon.
Bye-bye.